The world seemed to tilt beneath me as Victoria's words landed with surgical precision. "We're restructuring your position." The conference room's temperature seemed to plummet 20 degrees, while the fluorescent lights suddenly burned too bright against my retinas. My fingertips went numb as I watched her straighten, almost imperceptibly. A subtle shift that spoke volumes. She was enjoying this. Beside her, Felicity from HR adjusted her watch band with practiced indifference, both of them waiting for my reaction with barely concealed anticipation. 15 years of my life, my work, my innovation, all being dismissed in a sterile conference room on a Tuesday morning. The leather portfolio I'd brought, filled with next quarter's research projections, now felt absurdly heavy in my lap. "My name is Rachel. I'm 55, and I created the algorithm that transformed an industry. This is the story of how I reclaimed my rightful place after they tried to erase me." "The company is moving in a new direction," Felicity added, sliding a manila folder across the polished table. "Your contributions have been valuable, but we're consolidating the research division." The folder contained what I already knew it would: a severance package designed to be just generous enough to discourage legal action. My fingers didn't tremble as I accepted it without opening it. I'd built systems that processed millions of calculations per second, yet they thought I couldn't calculate the timing of my own dismissal. "I completely understand," I replied, my voice eerily steady. "These decisions are never easy." Relief flickered across their faces. They'd expected tears, perhaps, or angry protests. The emotional outburst of a woman past her prime. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment for precisely 23 days, ever since a misdirected email had appeared in my inbox, revealing their plans with stark corporate language. Transition of legacy personnel. The email had been part of a thread between Edward, Victoria, and the legal department discussing the timeline for my removal and the reclamation of my research division. "We'd like you to clean out your desk by Friday," Victoria continued, the satisfaction in her voice barely concealed. "We'll need your keycard, company laptop, and phone. Your team will be notified this afternoon." My team. 6 brilliant engineers who called me Dr. J behind my back, a nickname born of respect, not mockery. The same team that had helped me develop the distributed processing algorithm that now powered DynamicTech's flagship product, FinanceSphere, accounting software used by 42% of Fortune 500 companies. "Of course," I said, rising with deliberate calm. "Is there anything else?" They exchanged glances, thrown by my composure. Victoria recovered first. "That's all for now. Thank you for making this professional." As I walked back to my office, I passed the executive boardroom where CEO Edward Mitchell was leading the quarterly review. Through the glass wall, I could see him gesturing at a slide titled Q3 Revenue Projections. The same Edward Mitchell who had taken sole credit for my algorithm at last year's technology summit, referring to me only as one of our research team members in his keynote speech. I closed my office door and pulled out my personal phone, sending a text. "It's happening. Friday is my last day." The response appeared almost instantly. "Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details." I permitted myself a small smile as I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Today was Tuesday. On Friday, I would leave DynamicTech for the last time, and Monday would be extraordinary. That evening, I met James Wilson at Sapphire, an upscale restaurant 17 miles from DynamicTech's headquarters. As the CEO of Integral Systems, DynamicTech's largest competitor, James understood the value of discretion. We'd first connected 6 months ago at an industry conference after his insightful questions about my algorithm made it clear he truly understood its significance. Unlike my own CEO, we'd maintained a professional correspondence ever since, discussing theoretical improvements to distributed processing systems. The restaurant's soft lighting reflected off his glasses as he shook his head. They actually went through with it. I suspected they might, but to dismiss the very architect of their core technology. "Edward never understood what I actually created," I replied, cutting into my untouched salmon. "He saw the implementation, the interface, the marketing potential, but the underlying architecture, that was just tech stuff to him." The irony was delicious. 3 months earlier, I discovered that the patent application for my algorithm had never been filed. An administrative oversight, they'd claimed. They'd planned to push me out before securing the patent, knowing intellectual property developed by employees typically belonged to the company. What Dynamic Tech didn't know was that I'd been working on refinements to the algorithm on my own time, using my personal equipment. Those improvements, which increased processing efficiency by 43%, weren't covered by my employment agreement. After discovering the misdirected email about my planned dismissal, I had meticulously documented my work process. Time-stamped videos of coding sessions and digital notarization of my development logs, all done evenings and weekends on my home equipment. I had quietly filed for a patent under my own name, fully documented with timestamps proving the work was completed outside company time. "All the paperwork is finalized," James said, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. "As soon as you sign, Integral Systems officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent. The press release goes out Monday announcing you as our new Chief Innovation Officer." I reviewed the documents carefully. A 7-figure signing bonus, equity in Integral Systems, and royalties from all products using my algorithm. James and I had been laying this groundwork since I'd contacted him about the patent situation 3 weeks ago, after finding that damning email. "What do you think Edward's face will look like when he realizes what's happened?" James asked, a hint of mischief in his eyes. I looked up from the contract. "I'm more concerned about my team," I admitted. "They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout." James nodded. "We have positions for all 6 of them, senior roles with significant raises." I signed the final page. In one move, I had secured my future, protected my team, and reclaimed ownership of my work. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of exit interviews and carefully worded goodbyes. I maintained my professional facade throughout, even as rumors spread. I documented everything meticulously, every project, every password, every process, evidence that I had acted in good faith while the company had not. During my final exit interview, Felicity went through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency. "You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of Dynamic Tech," she stated, not looking up from her tablet. "Of course," I replied evenly. "Anything developed within the scope of my employment using company resources during company time." I emphasized each qualifier deliberately, but Felicity was too busy checking boxes to notice the precise language I was using. As I packed my desk, Victoria stopped by, leaning against the doorframe with artificial casualness. "You know, these restructuring decisions are never personal," she said, watching me place my awards into a cardboard box. "Edward feels the company needs to move in a more youthful direction." I looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "I understand completely. Business is business." Something in my tone made her pause, but she quickly dismissed whatever doubt had flickered across her mind. What could a soon-to-be unemployed 55-year-old woman possibly do? "Will you be taking time off?" she asked with synthetic concern. "Actually, I already have something lined up," I replied, closing the box. "I start Monday." Surprise flashed across her features. "That's fast. Anything interesting?" I smiled. "Very, a leadership position." As I walked out of Dynamic Tech's headquarters for the final time, I looked back at the building where I'd spent 15 years of my life. Little did they know that in less than 72 hours, they would be hosting an emergency crisis meeting. Monday morning, I arrived at Integral Systems headquarters at precisely 7:30 a.m., stepping into my new role as Chief Innovation Officer. "The press release went live at 7 a.m., James informed me, handing me a coffee. "Industry newsletters are already picking it up." The announcement had been crafted with strategic precision. Integral Systems acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary processing algorithm, welcomes creator Dr. Rachel Kincaid as Chief Innovation Officer. It emphasized my role as the sole inventor and stated that any company currently using the technology would need to negotiate licensing agreements. At 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up with a text from Michael, my lead developer. "Complete chaos here. What did you do?" I smiled. "Check your personal email. All 6 of you have offers waiting. I discreetly collected their personal contact information during my final week, citing a farewell dinner I planned to organize. Meanwhile, at Dynamic Tech, the scheduled executive meeting had morphed into an emergency crisis session. The legal team was frantically reviewing my employment contract and the documentation around the algorithm's development. At 10:45 a.m., I received an email from Edward himself. "Rachel, there appears to be a misunderstanding. Please call me at your earliest convenience." I forwarded it to Integral Systems' legal team without responding. By noon, Dynamic Tech stock had dropped 7%, while Integral Systems had seen a 14% increase. 3 technology journals had requested interviews with me about what one reporter called the intellectual property coup of the year. "How are you feeling?" James asked, stopping by my new office, a corner suite with windows on 2 sides, twice the size of my space at Dynamic Tech. "Validated," I replied honestly. 15 years of watching others take credit for my work, and now, finally, recognition. By Tuesday morning, the full impact of my departure had become clear. Dynamic Tech's flagship product relied entirely on my algorithm. Without licensing rights to my patent, they faced 2 options: negotiate with Integral Systems or rebuild their technology from scratch, a process that would take years and millions in development costs. "Edward has called an all-hands meeting," Michael texted. "Rumor is they're going to try to sue you." Our legal department responded, "Let them try. Your documentation is impeccable. We've prepared for this scenario." The respect I received at Integral Systems was a stark contrast to my final years at Dynamic Tech. When I spoke in meetings, people actually listened. My age and experience were viewed as assets rather than liabilities. By Wednesday, the industry fallout had intensified. 2 major clients had contacted Integral Systems about switching from finance sphere. My phone rang. Felicity from HR. "Rachel," she began, her voice lacking its usual efficiency. "I'm calling to discuss the situation with your patent. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding about ownership rights." "I don't think there's any misunderstanding," I replied calmly. "My employment agreement clearly states that intellectual property developed on my own time, using my own resources, remains mine. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss." "Any further communication should go through Integral Systems' legal department," I interrupted. "I'm sure you understand." By Friday, Dynamic Tech had entered full crisis mode. Their stock had fallen 23%, triggering concerned calls from major investors. Industry analysts were publishing pieces with titles like, "Can Dynamic Tech survive without its core algorithm?" That afternoon, Dynamic Tech's attorneys reached out to Integral Systems about licensing arrangements. Our legal team responded with terms that were technically fair but strategically painful. 3 times the standard industry rate, plus a public acknowledgement of my role as the technology's sole inventor. The following Monday, I led the first meeting with my newly assembled innovation team, which included all 6 of my former engineers from Dynamic Tech. The energy in the room was electric as we mapped out the next evolution of the algorithm. As we wrapped up, my assistant appeared at the door. "Dr. Kincaid, there's been a significant development with Dynamic Tech. Their board just announced an emergency leadership change. Edward Mitchell is stepping down, effective immediately." I maintained my composure, but inside, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. "Thank you for letting me know." Within hours, industry publications were reporting that Dynamic Tech's board had lost confidence in Edward's leadership following the patent oversight. Victoria was also out, along with the head of legal. That evening, I received an email from Henry Sullivan, Dynamic Tech's newly appointed interim CEO. "Dr. Kincaid, I'd like to discuss a fair licensing arrangement for your patented technology. We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions publicly and make appropriate amends for the oversights of previous management." I forwarded the email to James. "Phase 1, complete." His reply came quickly. "Beautifully executed. Looks like Dynamic Tech is finally learning an expensive lesson about valuing innovation and innovators." 3 months later, I delivered the keynote address at the National Technology Innovation Conference, standing on the same stage where Edward had once claimed credit for my work. Today, I want to talk about innovation, ownership, and the importance of properly valuing intellectual contributions, regardless of where they come from. As I spoke, I noticed Victoria sitting in the audience, now working for a smaller firm. Our eyes met briefly, and she quickly looked away. Afterward, during the reception, several young women engineers approached me seeking advice. One confided, "Your story changed how I document my work. I started keeping detailed logs of my development process on personal time." "Smart," I replied. "Your innovations deserve protection." 1 year after being told to clean out my desk, I sat in my spacious office at Integral Systems. Under my leadership, the company had released 3 groundbreaking products built on my algorithm, capturing significant market share from Dynamic Tech. James arrived with champagne. "The board asked me to share the news with you personally. Integral Systems has officially surpassed Dynamic Tech in market valuation for the first time in company history." I smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. That's what happens when you value innovation properly. My assistant delivered an invitation to speak at Women in Technology's annual Leadership Summit. The topic, Owning Your Intellectual Value, How Proper Documentation Changed an Industry. "You've become something of an icon," James commented. "The story about the executive who didn't recognize what he had until it was gone has become a cautionary tale in corporate boardrooms." "It was never about revenge," I said, raising my glass. "It was about recognition, about showing the industry that innovation isn't anonymous. It comes from real people who deserve real credit." As the afternoon sun streamed through my office windows, I reflected on my journey. At 56, I had finally found what had eluded me throughout my career. Not just success, but acknowledgement. My name was now permanently attached to the algorithm that had changed an industry, exactly where it belonged. That morning, I'd received a message from a former colleague still at Dynamic Tech. The company was struggling to rebuild, having lost not only their core technology, but also their reputation. Edward had been unable to secure another executive position in the industry. If you've ever been dismissed, diminished, or had your contributions overlooked, remember this. Documentation is power. Your work has value, your innovations matter, and sometimes the most satisfying response to being underestimated is proving exactly what they lost when they decided you were disposable. Keep records, trust your instincts, and remember that recognition delayed is not recognition denied. It's just the setup for a more satisfying conclusion. My vision tunneled to a single line of code on the screen, a signature I'd embedded in Sentinel Shield's core architecture, only it wasn't my signature anymore. It had been replaced with my cousin Nico's name, his digital fingerprint now embedded in the system I'd spent 18 months bringing to life. As of today, Nico will be taking over as lead architect on the Sentinel Shield project, Uncle Frederick announced to the packed boardroom, his hand clasping Nico's shoulder with unmistakable pride. His innovations have impressed our investors, and the board agrees he's the right person to take this from prototype to market. The subtle smirk on Nico's face as he glanced in my direction sent a cold wave through my body. My hands gripped the conference table edge so tightly my knuckles turned white, yet I somehow maintained my expression. 3 generations of the Harlow family tech dynasty watched from around the table, none of them seeming to notice or care about the theft happening in plain sight. My name is Olivia. I'm 34 and an AI security architect. This is the story of how I reclaimed my family's integrity along with my own creation. The Harlow Technology Group had been our family's legacy for nearly 6 decades. My grandfather Julian had founded it, my father Thomas had expanded it, and my uncle Frederick now ran it with an iron grip that disguised itself as tradition. I'd grown up hearing stories about how blood was thicker than water, how family businesses required sacrifice for the greater good. What no one mentioned was whose sacrifice would be required. I'd returned to the family business 3 years ago after spending a decade building my reputation at IBM and Google. Uncle Frederick had practically begged me to come back, insisting my expertise in AI security was exactly what Harlow needed to stay competitive. "We need a Harlow leading this innovation," he'd said during our dinner at the Mayfair restaurant, where all important family business happened. not some outsider. The subtext was clear. My father's division had been struggling since his passing, and Frederick needed someone with genuine expertise to save face with the board. What he didn't mention was that his definition of Harlow didn't include me, at least not beyond using my expertise. For 18 months, I'd worked on Sentinel Shield, an AI security system capable of predicting and neutralizing attacks before they materialized. Unlike anything currently on the market, it could identify attack patterns in their embryonic stages. It analyzed countless data points to generate adaptive defenses in real time. I'd named it after the vigilant guardians in ancient mythology, protectors who saw threats before they arrived. The irony wasn't lost on me now. 6 months ago, I'd noticed irregularities in the development server access logs, late-night logins, duplicated files, subtle changes to documentation, all traced back to one of two IDs, my Uncle Frederick's executive account or my cousin Nico's development credentials. I'd installed additional monitoring tools, saying nothing but watching everything. I'd also taken the precaution of creating a private backup server that mirrored all system activities, accessible only through my personal authentication protocols, a standard security practice I'd learned at Google. Now, sitting in this boardroom, I understood exactly what they'd been doing. Olivia has been instrumental in getting the project to this point, Uncle Frederick continued, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when publicly acknowledging someone he was privately undermining. We're grateful for her contribution, as if I hadn't conceived, designed, and built the entire system. As we prepare for next week's investor showcase, Nico will lead the demonstration of Sentinel Shield's capabilities, Frederick continued. The board has approved a generous recognition bonus for Olivia's work, $200,000. $200,000 for a system worth billions, for 18 months of 80-hour weeks, for the innovation that would cement Harlow's place at the forefront of cybersecurity for the next decade. I'd heard rumors of Uncle Frederick's tactics before, how my cousin Elise had been pushed out of her biotech division, how my father had mysteriously lost board support before his sudden heart attack, but experiencing it firsthand awakened something in me I hadn't known existed. If there are no questions, we'll adjourn and let Nico get to work on finalizing the investor presentation, Frederick said, already gathering his papers. I cleared my throat. Actually, I have a question. The room fell silent. The Harlows didn't question things in board meetings. What exactly is Nico demonstrating at the investor showcase? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Uncle Frederick's smile tightened. Sentinel Shield, of course. I nodded slowly. Interesting. And which version will he be demonstrating? The one I designed or the one with his signature that appeared in the codebase overnight? Nico's smug expression faltered. My cousin Rebecca, the family's legal counsel, straightened in her chair. I'm not sure what you're implying, Frederick said coldly. I'm not implying anything, I replied, standing up. I'm stating that Sentinel Shield has been altered to remove my credentials and insert Nico's. I'm stating that my creation has been stolen. That's a serious accusation, Rebecca interjected, lawyer mode activated. It's not an accusation, I replied, gathering my laptop. It's a fact documented by the system itself. Sentinel Shield is designed to identify and record unauthorized modifications, even ones made by people who think they control it. Frederick's face darkened. Sit down, Olivia. This is inappropriate. What's inappropriate is theft, I said, closing my laptop. But by all means, proceed with the investor showcase. I'm sure it will be enlightening for everyone involved. I walked out of the boardroom, ignoring the murmurs behind me. Security stopped me at the elevator. Apparently, my access had already been revoked. My office belongings had been packed into a box, my parking pass deactivated. They'd planned this meticulously, removing every trace of me from Harlow Technology Group in a single hour. What they hadn't planned for was that Sentinel Shield had been watching and learning all along, with its secure logs replicating to my private server that Frederick knew nothing about. That evening, I didn't rage or panic. Instead, I ordered Thai food, watched 3 episodes of The Bear, and waited. At 9:17 p.m., my phone rang. Olivia, it's Uncle Frederick. We need to talk. It's rather late, I replied calmly. This is urgent. The car is already on its way. 40 minutes later, I was escorted back into Harlow Tower. The security guard who had watched me leave with my cardboard box now avoided eye contact. In the main development lab, I found Uncle Frederick and Nico hunched over a workstation, faces illuminated by error messages flooding the screen. Fix it, Frederick demanded the moment I entered. I set my bag down and took my time settling into a chair. Fix what, exactly? Don't play games, Nico snapped, gesturing at the screen. The system is malfunctioning. It's generating thousands of security alerts about internal threats. That sounds concerning, I said, feigning innocence. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Frederick's face flushed. This isn't funny, Olivia. The showcase is in 3 days. We have investors flying in from 4 continents. Your showcase? I corrected. Your system now, isn't it? Frederick inhaled deeply, his voice shifting to that smooth, persuasive tone he used to close deals. Perhaps we were hasty today. I'm prepared to discuss a more equitable arrangement, co-lead status, a more substantial compensation package, even an executive position. What exactly is happening with the system? I asked, ignoring his offer. Nico hesitated, looking to Frederick, who nodded reluctantly. It's flagging Harlow's own network components as security threats, Nico explained. It's generated hundreds of reports documenting what it's calling ethical breaches. It's completely unusable. I couldn't help but smile. Sentinel Shield is designed to identify threats, all threats. Frederick's expression darkened. What did you do? I didn't sabotage anything, I said simply. Sentinel Shield is working exactly as designed. During development, I trained it using case studies of cyber attacks, including scenarios where threats originated inside organizations. Understanding dawned in Frederick's eyes. You taught it to spy on us? I taught it to recognize threats wherever they originate, I corrected. Apparently, it identified unauthorized access to its own architecture as a significant security risk. Nico paled. You can't prove anything. I don't need to, I replied. Sentinel Shield has been documenting everything for months. Every unauthorized access, every duplicated file, every modified document. It's all compiled in those reports, complete with timestamps, access logs, and recorded keystrokes. And before you ask, yes, I have secure access to all those logs through encrypted channels that you won't find on company servers. The silence that followed was profound. What do you want? Frederick finally asked, anger giving way to calculation. I folded my hands on the table. Full recognition as Sentinel Shield's creator and primary architect, 50% ownership of all related patents and intellectual property, a permanent board seat to oversee its ethical implementation, and $10 million in compensation for your attempt to erase me from my own creation. That's extortion, Frederick hissed. No, I corrected calmly. That's negotiation. Extortion would be me sending those reports directly to the investors, the tech media, and every Harlow family member who wasn't in that boardroom today. Frederick and Nico exchanged glances. For a moment, I thought they might argue, but then Frederick's shoulders slumped in defeat. The system, he said, voice tight. Can you fix it before the showcase? Sentinel Shield doesn't need fixing, I explained. It just needs proper authorization protocols. Right now, it's flagging commands because its creator, me, was removed from the authentication chain. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small flash drive, and set it on the table. This contains an authentication update that will resolve the immediate issues. Consider it a good faith gesture toward our new arrangement. The contracts can be drawn up tomorrow. Frederick stared at the drive, then at me. And if I refuse? Then Sentinel Shield remains broken, I said simply. Your investor showcase fails, and those internal ethical breach reports find their way into some very interested hands, including those of Grandpa Julian, who still holds enough voting shares to remove you as CEO. He reached for the flash drive. You planned this all along. I smiled. Number I hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but after finding unauthorized access to my secure server months ago, I built in protections. For the system and for myself, I came prepared tonight because the system alerted me to increasingly frantic login attempts after hours. How did you know we'd try to cut you out? Nico asked, bewildered. I stood, picking up my bag. I didn't know for certain, but Sentinel Shield is designed to recognize patterns and predict threats before they materialize. I guess some of that rubbed off on its creator. 3 days later, I arrived at the investor showcase as the newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer of Harlow Technology Group. Uncle Frederick introduced me with a tight smile that never reached his eyes. We're especially proud to have Olivia leading this initiative, he told the packed room of investors. Sentinel Shield represents the culmination of her visionary work in AI security. The demonstration proceeded flawlessly. Sentinel Shield neutralized every simulated attack with elegant precision. As I fielded technical questions, my phone buzzed with a notification from my secure private server. Sentinel Shield authentication restored, threat neutralized, system integrity secured, creator protections active. The AI was learning faster than I'd anticipated, recognizing threats, neutralizing them, and safeguarding its future, just as designed. 6 months later, Sentinel Shield prevented a major cyber attack on the European banking network. The incident, which could have resulted in billions in damages, established our system as the gold standard in cybersecurity. At the emergency board meeting following the incident, Grandpa Julian made a rare appearance. This family has always survived by adapting, he said, his gaze moving from Frederick to me. Sentinel Shield represents the future of Harlow, and its creator represents the future of this family's leadership. Uncle Frederick and I maintained a professional relationship. He focused on business development, where his skills were valuable. I led technical innovation, where my expertise was irreplaceable. We weren't friends and never would be, but we'd reached an equilibrium that worked. Sometimes I wondered if I could have handled things differently, taken legal action, fought it out in court, or simply walked away to build something new elsewhere. But family businesses have complexities that transcend typical corporate politics. In the end, I had built something too powerful to be stolen, and I had ensured that no one, not even family, would control it without me. Last week, as we celebrated Sentinel Shield's successful public offering, valuing the company at $3.7 billion, my younger cousin Mia approached me at the event. "What's the secret to building something revolutionary?" she asked, eyes filled with ambition. I smiled. It's not about the code. It's about understanding that the greatest threats often come from where you least expect them. Even family. The real challenge isn't just creating technology. It's ensuring it can adapt, evolve, and defend itself without compromising its core integrity. Mia nodded thoughtfully. I glanced at my phone where a quiet notification from Sentinel Shield appeared. System integrity secured. Threat neutralized. Protections active. Just as it was designed to do, just as its creator had learned to do. The crystal flute slipped from Diana's manicured fingers as her words registered in my brain. It's just that well. We have some very important guests coming. The governor, several CEOs. Her voice dropped to a stage whisper. We can't have anyone feeling uncomfortable. I gripped my office chair, leather creaking beneath my fingers as the Manhattan skyline gleamed through floor-to-ceiling windows behind me. The phone call I'd been expecting for days had finally arrived. My own cousin was uninviting me from our family reunion at my own hotel. By anyone, I said. You mean yourself? Don't be dramatic, Olivia. It's just that the Starlight Grand is quite exclusive. The required attire alone. She trailed off. The implication clear. Her poor hotel clerk cousin couldn't possibly afford to attend. The irony burned like acid. Diana had no idea she was speaking to the owner of not just the Starlight Grand, but 16 other luxury hotels across 3 continents. My name is Rose, I'm 32, and I built a hotel empire while my family thought I was cleaning rooms. This is the story of how I made them finally see me. For 10 years, I'd endured their condescension. A hotel clerk? My father had roared when I graduated from Cornell's hotel administration program. No daughter of mine will wear a name tag and carry luggage. The memory of his flushed face still made my stomach tighten. I see, I kept my voice neutral. And who chose the venue? I did, of course. Pride saturated Diana's voice. Uncle Thomas says I have excellent taste. The Starlight Grand is the most prestigious hotel in Manhattan. She paused for effect. I had to pull some serious strings to book it for our reunion. I bit back a laugh. Diana hadn't pulled any strings. Her request had come through our regular booking channels, and I'd personally approved it last week after marking up the rate by 30%. That must have been difficult, I said mildly. Well, not everyone has my connections. The owner, R.C. Taylor, is notoriously private, but her staff was quite accommodating once they heard the Morrison name. Of course they were. I'd instructed them to be. Anyway, Diana continued, I'm sure you understand. Perhaps next year, if your situation improves. Are you still working at that little hotel in Brooklyn? The little hotel she referred to was actually my innovation lab, where I developed the service systems that had revolutionized the luxury hospitality industry. But the Morrisons had stopped paying attention to my career years ago. Something like that, I replied. After hanging up, memories washed over me in suffocating waves. Every family gathering where I'd been seated at the far end of the table. Diana's wedding 3 years ago, where she'd seated me with the catering staff, telling everyone it was so I'd feel more comfortable with my own kind. The countless times my achievements were dismissed as playing with hotels, while my cousin's mediocre accomplishments in finance were celebrated. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant, Nate. The Morrison family reunion contract needs your final signature. Shall I bring it up? I smiled, typing back. No need, I have plans for this one. Opening my laptop, I began making arrangements. If my family wanted to ban me from the reunion for being too poor, they were in for quite a surprise. The Starlight Grand was about to host a revelation none of them would ever forget. My sister Jillian called just as I was finalizing the arrangements. Rose, Diana called me. She said she had to uninvite you from the reunion. I'm so sorry. Don't be, I replied, signing the last document with a flourish. Actually, I have a favor to ask. Could you make sure everyone arrives exactly at 7 p.m.? It's important. Why? What are you planning? Let's just say Diana isn't the only one with connections at the Starlight Grand. I'll tell them there's a special welcome reception with complimentary champagne that ends promptly at 7:15, Jillian said, immediately catching on. No one in this family has ever turned down free luxury. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. I personally supervised every detail from the menu to the floral arrangements. The Morrison family wanted luxury. I would give them a show they'd never forget. The night before the reunion, I stood in the hotel's grand lobby watching the staff polish every surface to a mirror shine. The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the marble floors gleamed like sheets of ice. Everything was perfect. Nate appeared at my side, tablet in hand. All arrangements are in place. The new signage will be unveiled at exactly 7:15 p.m. tomorrow. He hesitated. Are you sure about this? I nodded, thinking of Diana's condescending phone call, of years of subtle and not so subtle humiliation. Absolutely sure. After all, it's not every day I get to welcome my family to my hotel. I smiled, imagining their faces when they realized the truth. Tomorrow would change everything, and I was ready. At precisely 6:45 p.m. on the evening of the reunion, I stood in my private office on the top floor of the Starlight Grand, watching the Morrison family arrive through the security feeds. They came in waves of designer clothes and expensive jewelry, each trying to outshine the other. Diana swept in wearing Valentino, directing staff like she owned the place. My father's Bentley pulled up to the valet station, followed by a stream of luxury cars carrying aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years. Everything's ready, Nate said, adjusting his tablet. The staff knows their cues. Should I have security on standby? I shook my head. No need. The Morrisons care too much about appearances to make a scene in public. I smoothed down my custom-made suit, Armani, though they wouldn't expect me to know the difference. Let's give them time to settle in. Through the cameras, I watched my family members gather in the grand ballroom. Diana held court near the champagne fountain, loudly explaining how she'd pulled strings to secure the venue. My father stood with his business associates, probably discussing the latest banking merger. Even my distant cousins were there, all carefully positioned to show off their perceived status. At 7:10 p.m., right on schedule, the hotel manager approached Diana with the first hint that something was amiss. "Ms. Morrison, I'm afraid there's been a slight issue with the reservation." Diana's face darkened. "What kind of issue?" "I personally arranged everything with your corporate office." "Yes, ma'am. It's just that the owner has some specific requests regarding tonight's event." "The owner?" Diana laughed dismissively. "I seriously doubt R.C. Taylor concerns herself with individual events. Now, if you'll excuse me—" "Actually," I said, stepping into the ballroom, "R.C. Taylor concerns herself with quite a lot of things." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Every head turned toward me. The uninvited relative, the family embarrassment, standing in the doorway of Manhattan's most prestigious hotel, wearing a suit that cost more than Diana's car. "Rose?" My father's voice carried across the room. "What are you doing here?" "Diana said I couldn't afford to attend," I finished for him, walking slowly into the center of the room. She was concerned I might embarrass the family. Diana stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "This is a private event. I'll have security remove you." "No," I cut her off. "You won't." On cue, Nate pressed a button on his tablet. The massive screen behind the stage lit up with the hotel's logo, and beneath it, my full name, Rose Charlotte Morrison Taylor, founder and CEO, R.C. Taylor Hotels International. The gasps were audible. Diana's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "That's not possible," she stammered. "Would you like to see my business cards?" I asked sweetly. "Or perhaps the deed to the building? I have those right here." I patted the leather portfolio under my arm. My father pushed through the crowd, his face a mix of shock and something else. Was it pride? "You own the Starlight Grand?" "And 16 other properties across 3 continents," I confirmed. "Though this one is special. It's where I started my career as a junior housekeeper while all of you were laughing at my foolish career choice." The memory surfaced again. Diana mocking my name tag, my aunts whispering about wasted potential, my cousins excluding me from family photos because I didn't fit the image. "All those years," I continued, my voice carrying in the stunned silence. "While you were so busy looking down on me, you never bothered to look up to see what I was building. The little hotel in Brooklyn Diana loves to joke about. It's my innovation lab, where we develop the systems that have revolutionized the luxury hotel industry." Nate stepped forward, distributing folders to key family members. "Inside, you'll find the true story of R.C. Taylor Hotels, along with documentation of your rather interesting booking for tonight's event." Diana snatched her folder, her hands shaking as she opened it. Her eyes widened at the numbers. "This can't—" "The rate we charged you is about 30% above our standard fee," I confirmed. "Consider it a family discount in reverse." My sister Jillian burst out laughing from somewhere in the crowd. Others joined in nervously, unsure whether they were allowed to find humor in the situation. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father demanded. "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. 10 years ago, you told me no daughter of yours would ever work in a hotel." I let that sink in before adding, "Well, you were right about one thing. I don't work in a hotel, I own them." The screens around the ballroom came to life, showing images of my properties around the world. The sunset view from our Maldives resort, the snow-capped peaks surrounding our Swiss chateau, the glittering skyline visible from every room of our Dubai tower. "As for tonight's reunion," I continued, "your reservation hasn't been canceled. You're welcome to stay. In fact, I've arranged a special tour of the property. I think it's time you saw what a career in customer service really looks like." Diana stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Rose, we never meant—" "Yes, you did," I cut her off gently. "You meant every snide comment, every exclusion, every moment of mockery. But that's okay, Because while you were all so busy maintaining appearances, I was building something real. I turned to the assembled crowd, raising my voice slightly. Welcome to the Starlight Grand. My staff will show you to your upgraded suites, though I'm afraid Diana's room had to be downgraded due to a last-minute VIP booking. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Diana's face flushed deep red as she realized she'd be staying in the same category of room she'd once mocked me for cleaning. As the family dispersed, guided by my impeccably trained staff, my father lingered behind. I was wrong, he said quietly, about everything. I studied him for a moment, seeing for the first time uncertainty in his eyes. Yes, you were. But would you like to know the best part about owning 17 hotels, Dad? He raised an eyebrow questioningly. I have 17 different presidential suites where you can stay while you figure out how to make things right. A small smile cracked his serious expression. Where did you learn to negotiate like that? Probably the same place I learned about hospitality, by starting at the bottom and working my way up, something this family never understood. Later that night, after the tours were complete and the family had settled into their rooms, Diana's notably smaller than the others, I stood in my private penthouse looking out over the city. Nate brought in the final numbers for the evening. Your family seems subdued, he observed. I laughed. Amazing what a little perspective can do. Did you see Diana's face when she realized her room doesn't have a city view? Are you going to tell them about the expansion? The new properties in Paris and Tokyo? I smiled, thinking of the contracts sitting on my desk. The Starlight Grand was just the beginning. Let's save something for next year's reunion. After all, every good hotelier knows the importance of repeat business. As the city lights twinkled below, I thought about the long journey from that first day as a housekeeper to this moment. Success wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving myself right. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with a complimentary upgrade and a spectacular view. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Can we talk tomorrow? Please. I smiled, remembering how she'd kept my number in her contacts all these years, probably to have someone to look down on when she needed an ego boost. I typed back a simple response. Of course. I believe your breakfast reservation is at 9 a.m. I own that restaurant too. Sometimes the greatest luxury isn't in the thread count of the sheets or the height of the ceiling. It's in the simple pleasure of finally being seen for who you really are. And as I looked out over my hotel empire, I knew that tomorrow would bring a new chapter in the Morrison family story. After all, every great hotel knows that the key to success isn't just in providing a room, it's in creating an experience they'll never forget. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.